Hello, and welcome to our discussion all about starting your self-build in the right financial direction. So for anybody who is out there and thinking about buying land or has land or a plot already and looking to build, I think we get so many questions about how should I go about organizing this? What are the costs going to be before I start? I need to know before I even go to a mortgage broker, perhaps, or I just need to know whether this is possible. And there's so many things that come into the process of getting the costs organized that I think it becomes really important to explain what the process is and to try and provide anybody who's looking to build, with a clear route forward. And that's what we are really here for, is to try to provide much more assurance about the right way to go with it all. And we've got a number of services from Neat Living that we provide to help with all of that. So I wanted to dig in and go through the process a little bit more and explain it and let you understand, how we can perhaps assist. So first of all, everybody has a motivation about their build. Is it, is it just to get a better understanding of the cost, to make it a sort of go or no go decision? Maybe you're already talking to a broker and you need a bit more backup. Maybe you're worried about the costs running away and you just need to kind of get a mechanism for having a better control on all of that. Or just really at this point, a better understanding of the process overall. And let's also just break down this whole thing about what is self-build. Well, it certainly doesn't involve running around with saws and screwdrivers and barrel loads of cement at all. I think the term self-build is somewhat misleading, but essentially it's a means to build the house that you want to build, rather than buying something that is available from one of the main house builders up and down the UK. I think that's really what self-build companies are aspiring to offer the market. I think there's also so many benefits here that, obviously the sort of customization and the personalization of each individual house. But also I think there's a real opportunity to build a better quality home and more energy efficient home, which is so important these days. And, with that comes an enormous satisfaction and sort of personal investment in it, whether that's emotional or financial. But there's a huge investment into a build of this type. So it's really important that we try and provide this sort of service to go along with that, to help you, get through that whole process. I think one of the things that self-build companies maybe don't explain all that well is that the whole design process makes it actually really difficult to get a clear number right at the start of the project. And we're going to go through this tonight in a little bit more detail about how we can provide solutions for that. But it's just to let you know that I don't think that anyone's really trying to hold back on giving you the total numbers at all. I think it's just the very nature of this sort of customized and personalized service means that there are going to be aspects which need to be resolved for the individual project and the individual location. So we can certainly start off with, from our point of view at Neat Living, we provide a clear cost of the timber kit. But then there's obviously the other aspects of putting it all, completing the build on site and what else is involved. So as I've just to recap, I think what we're going to be looking at this evening is discussing about the process, what's involved. We're going to be discussing budget cost plans and competitive tenders. and what detailed design is and how that can really be used as a means to drive down costs through a competitive tendering process. So we'll cover all of these main items just in a moment. So going back to this whole thing about process, and here we have a big long list. I won't try and read it all out, but you can kind of get, a quick snapshot by just glancing down, buying land or plot, the planning permission and the process, building warrant, competitive tendering, construction, and then any fit out works. But with that, there's a sort of sub-heading, that follows a big long, you can almost see it, it's like a big long snake of a route that you got to go through all of these various items before you can get onto the, further down the page. So this is what I mean by the process. And as you go down that process, you get more and more information and more detail, which that really helps with, for example, competitive tendering. But at the outset, we don't have all of that information just as yet. So here's all of that just presented in a slightly different way. You'll see here that right at the beginning, at where you're at land purchase or project start, if you want to call it that, the risk and uncertainty is really, really high because there's not a lot of information available. And if I move my face out the way, it should say information. Where did I put myself? In here somewhere. So the information is really low at the beginning. But as you go through the process, the information increases substantially and the risk and the uncertainty drops substantially until right at the very end, once the building is built, then there's no risk and uncertainty because it's all done and dusted and the information is at its max. Now, that's a really simple view of it all. Let me just show you another view, which is, that says information. So just squeezes on. So I suppose another way of looking at that risk and uncertainty thing is that it starts, even if you haven't bought land, it starts really low. But as soon as you go out there to buy a plot, of course, it becomes very high instantaneously. But there's lots of things you can do to mitigate that risk and uncertainty. You can get surveys done. We can do valuation exercises. So there's a lot of things we can do to help with that purchase process right at the front end. And then once you get into the concept and pre-application for planning aspect, again, it becomes sort of high risk because there's a lot of unknown information. But by putting together the initial design information and the concept, we can then get that in front of planners and get them to provide some sort of reassurance through the formal pre-application process. We won't get into all of the details of that tonight particularly, but it's an excellent way to go. And it's quite a cost-effective way to kind of flush out any major concerns from the planners before going into detailed design. But eventually, as you go through the process of detailed design and then building warrant and then through the competitive tendering aspect, you get to this really nice position where the information is at a level that gives you a lot of confidence before you go into the actual construction of the building, that you've done everything that you can do in terms of design to reduce your risk and put that risk and uncertainty on a downward trajectory towards or all through the construction period. And, that's really what you want. You want to go into your build with full knowledge about expected costs and knowing that you've got the best prices in the market and the right contractors on board to do the work that needs to be done. So again, this slide is kind of repeating a little bit what I've just said, but essentially all of the work to get a successful build and construction and build and fit out, all of the work is really done in advance. So particularly in that sort of planning, building design and detailed warrant and the competitive tendering stages. So if those stages are managed properly, then the rest of it is a dawdle. If items in 1 to 4, say, or 2 to 4 essentially, are not undertaken properly, then that's what leads to problems. So it's really important to get this environment created where all of the information is brought together and you can conduct a proper competitive tendering process for your build. So here are two tools in your toolbox, I suppose, and they're both used at different times. The first is called the budget cost plan, and the second is a competitive tender. The two differ quite a lot, but they both have their purpose at the right or at different stages of the project. Now, I'm not going to read out all of this verbatim. I'm sure that you can maybe just zoom in on the slide a little bit just to read the text. But essentially, the budget cost plan is used right at the start. It's very useful. If I can just explain, let me read over the information required and the pros and cons, because I think that will give you a nice idea about it all. So for a budget cost plan, all we need is concept or pre-application for planning drawings, a project description, and a sort of general specification for the build. And that's all the information that's needed. So it's really low cost to pull all that together. The pros about it are it's quick, it's low cost, it requires a low amount of design information, as I've mentioned. It uses local construction market rates applicable to your location of the building, which is very important because costs differ so much up and down the country. And in terms of the cons, there are some cons. The budget cost plan cannot be 100% accurate. It will contain exclusions that cannot be priced just at this point, essentially due to lack of information. But it does make broad assumptions about costs where detail is lacking. Now, I'm not sure that particular point is a con or a pro, but I put it as a con because I suppose that it's really highlighting that there are going to be assumptions made for the purposes of the cost plan, and that's a semi-unknown. But the idea is, and we'll come on to showing you the sort of makeup of a budget cost plan in a moment, but the idea is it will give you a pretty good idea of what your expected costs are right at the start. And as I said, it's a very low-cost way to go. Now, compare that in terms of the competitive tender process. So that is where, in terms of information, there's a much greater amount of information. You're using the work that was done during the detailed design process, fully detailed drawings of all aspects of the building. That is structural, architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing drawings and details. Essentially a full specification and typically a bill of quantities. So all of that information is used to help to collate prices or costs for your project. In terms of pros, it is comprehensive, but it definitely is value for money. It's a means to obtain the most competitive costs out there from local selected contractors, and it reduces the risk of costs going over budget during the construction. And that is really the main benefit here. Is it really helps to tie things down and makes a very robust process going through the build. In terms of cons, I think the major con is it can't be done at the outset, i.e. it can't be done before you've got all of this other information. So that is the major problem with a competitive tender. So if you're asking how much will my project cost, then this is where the budget cost plan will really help you, particularly if it's to get an early handle on costs and make an early stop or go decision about the project. So here's a little summary, I suppose, of the essence of a budget cost plan. Shall I do this? And essentially, this isn't quite the full budget cost plan. I've just sort of summarized key pages from it. But essentially, what you're seeing here is in this section, this first page is a sort of summary page. You can see that there's the main headings for the project. There's various allowances made that are highlighted here, and contingencies for the build in case of unexpected costs. The subsequent pages are essentially a detail of those costs that go into the summary. So it'll split down all the major elements of work and compile that and bring that into the summary. There is also some other information that's issued as part of a budget cost plan, and that's generally aspects such as it'll list any exclusions that haven't been priced, as I mentioned before, and that sort of thing, and any particular terms and conditions that might be relevant. But it's a really good way to start right at the beginning of your project. And just in terms of the top 3 benefits, I would say that the top 3 benefits are, getting the construction cost, getting a good idea at a high level to begin with is excellent. It can be used for the purposes of going to speak to a mortgage or finance broker to ask them, if they'll lend, and they will need information about the project as well as your own financial situation, and also the convenience of it. It's a very quick thing to put together for you and have it delivered back to you for your consideration, and then we can chat about it some more. So I suppose that's really those are the top 3 benefits from the get-go. In terms of the competitive tendering, I think I would very much call it a strategy. You're wanting to create the right environment to get the best cost for your project. And the way to do that is using the detailed design information, pulling it all together, which a QS will do with, and pulling all of that information, all the surveys and reports, and they'll also produce a specification or a schedule of works or bill of quantities to help to clarify the information for the tenderers, for the potential contractors, and providing them with good quality information is so important, because you do not want them to either exclude items or to overly allow for items because there's a lack of information, because both things will work against you. And finally, it's really important to get a decent number of suitably qualified main contractors who are keen to price the work. And typically this means you really want to have 3 competitive bids coming back at a minimum. And quite often you really want to be going out to, say, 4 or 5, because quite often one of them or 2 of them will drop out during the actual tendering process just because they suddenly got too busy, they've got another project going on, they don't have time to price it, or whatever excuse they want to come up with. But you really want to be going out to 3 to 5 people so that you've got at least 3 prices at the end to compare and contrast. So just on this point about what we mean by detailed design are not planning drawings. They're definitely not pre-application for planning drawings, and they're definitely not even full planning drawings, which are simply architectural drawings. And the building warrant is really about the technical aspects of the building. So that'll include elements such as obviously wall and floor and roof makeups in terms of insulation and materials, the mechanical services and the electrical and plumbing services, any renewables, and most importantly as well, the structural design. So all of these elements, they definitely all work in tandem. You can't design any of them in isolation to the other. And because of the way that building standards are going in the UK, i.e. improving considerably, it really focuses attention on getting a proper details of exactly how all of these elements come together. And as much as we probably all love location, self-build is also about detail. And I hope that, I've emphasized that the importance of getting that information all pulled together during the detailed design stage, which feeds into this competitive tendering process that we've looked at. So Neat Living provides services to help with all of this, and we'll obviously provide the timber kit as an entity, as a structure, but we will also provide all of the associated professional services. So this includes the budget cost plan that we discussed earlier. It includes handling all the aspects to do with the planning and dealing with the pre-application for planning, full application for planning, building warrant application. Obviously, it includes for the design aspects such as architectural, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, renewables, and in terms of the competitive tender aspects, it also includes arranging all of the identification of suitable contractors and putting together the right information, surveys, reports, etc., for that competitive tender process. So we hope that's a really good, it really lightens the load from the client's point of view to have one point of contact with all of this, and to really help push through this process and to help you achieve what you really need to achieve. So if you're looking to make a step with all of this, we can definitely get going with a budget cost plan. Initially, we would have a discussion with you or a Zoom call perhaps to run over any points. This can all be bought online, by the way, in terms of our standard budget cost plan is available on the website. We'll then use our standard drawings for any of our Neat Living homes to produce the budget cost plan, and then deliver that back to you and follow that up with a call to discuss it. If you've got any particular questions and you just need to contact us, please drop us a line and we can go from there and discuss any particular points in advance. If you want to do a customized build, i.e. not one of our standard designs, again, drop us a line. Delighted to help and talk through how we can make that all happen for you. So thank you. It's been a long time coming to put all of this information together. I hope that it's really been of interest and is of use to you. Please feel free to contact us. The number and the information are on the screen. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much for your time.